I'm Michael. I'm 28 years old, and my own father sent me a text message that effectively blew up my entire life. Before I tell you how I went from being homeless in an instant to having their lawyer practically begging me to call him back, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how stories like this can connect people from all over the world. Alright, let's get right into the night that changed everything. The screen of my phone cast a cold, blue light across my dark bedroom. The time was 11:27 p.m. I remember the exact minute because I'd been staring at the ceiling, trying to unwind my brain after a brutal 14-hour day as a data analyst. My job is to find patterns in chaos, to make sense of millions of scattered data points. Little did I know, my own life was about to become the most chaotic dataset I'd ever have to analyze. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. I expected a late-night email from my boss, or maybe a meme from a friend. I reached for it, my eyes still adjusting to the light. The notification was a text message. From Dad. My father isn't a man of many words. His texts are usually one-word answers or logistical questions. But this was different. This was a statement, a final judgment delivered with the cold efficiency of an executioner. We've changed all the locks. The key you have is useless now. We think it's time you stood on your own 2 feet. You don't have a home here anymore. You're not welcome. Let's see how tough you are now. I read the words once, my brain struggling to process them. Felt like reading a foreign language. I read them a second time, and the meaning crashed into me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Every word was a carefully chosen weapon. Useless. Not welcome. How tough you are now. It was a challenge. A taunt. A normal person would have spiraled. Panic. Disbelief. A desperate, frantic need for answers. And for a split second, I felt that vertigo, the sensation of the world tilting on its axis. The house they were talking about, the one I was now locked out of, was less than 10 miles away. My bed was there. My clothes were there. My entire life was in that house. But then something else took over. It was a strange and terrifying calm, the kind of absolute stillness you find at the center of a raging inferno. For years, I had been treading water in an ocean of obligation, guilt, and subtle manipulation. I had just gotten so used to the feeling of drowning that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand on solid ground. That text message wasn't the storm. It was the lighthouse showing me the shore. It wasn't an attack. It was an answer. The final, undeniable data point I needed to complete the picture. My thumb, which had been hovering over the call button, moved to take a screenshot instead. The click of the shutter was the quietest, most definitive sound I'd ever heard. I saved the image to a folder on my cloud drive, a folder labeled simply Evidence. It joined hundreds of other files, scanned receipts, bank statements, forwarded emails. They expected me to shatter. They were probably sitting in the living room, phones in hand, waiting for the inevitable hysterical phone call. They wanted tears. They wanted begging. They wanted to see me broken, to prove that I needed them more than they needed me. I decided in that moment to deny them the satisfaction. I would not give them the reaction they craved. I put my phone on silent, turned it face down on the nightstand, and rolled over. The crushing weight that usually sat on my chest, the constant worry about their bills, their happiness, their never-ending needs, was gone. In its place was a cold, hard stone of certainty. For the next 48 hours, I gave them nothing. No calls, no texts, just absolute, deafening silence. And on the morning of the third day, a Thursday, as I was calmly making my first cup of coffee, my phone rang. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the transcription popped up on my screen. The words were from a man named Mr. Davies, and they were the sweetest words I had ever read. Mr. Chun, this is the legal representative for Henry and Eleanor Chun. There seems to be a significant misunderstanding regarding a property petition. We have a problem, a serious problem. Please, call me back immediately. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. Problem. Oh, you have no idea what a problem you have. To really understand how a father could send a text like that to his son, you have to rewind. You have to go back to the beginning to see how the roles in our family were forged. We lived in a picture-perfect house in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. From the street, we looked like the American dream. Henry, my dad, was a respected project manager. Eleanor, my mom, was the perfect stay-at-home mom. And they had 2 kids. Olivia, my younger sister, the artist, the dreamer. And me. I was the tool. My apprenticeship began at 14. While my friends were discovering girls and learning to drive, I was on a rickety extension ladder with my dad, learning how to spackle hairline cracks in the siding. He was a tough teacher. Everything had to be perfect. Measure twice. Cut once, Michael. He'd say, a phrase I heard 1,000 times. But when the job was done, he'd wrap a heavy arm around my shoulders and beam with pride. Look at that, he'd say to my mom, who would be watching from the porch. The boy's a natural. He's got my work ethic. Tougher than any son I could have asked for. Those words were my paycheck. I chased that approval like a starving dog chasing a scrap of meat. So I worked. Every weekend. Every summer. My friends would be heading to the river, and I'd be regrouting the bathroom tile. They'd be going to a movie, and I'd be snaking the main drain because it was clogged with tree roots again. I remember one particularly miserable job when I was 15. We had a leak in the crawl space under the house. It was a dark, damp, spider-infested nightmare. My dad, citing a bad back, handed me a flashlight and a bucket of sealant. You're smaller, you'll fit in there better, he said. Be a man about it. I spent 6 hours on my belly in the cold mud, patching a leaking pipe, spiders crawling over my hands. When I finally emerged, covered in filth and shivering, my mom handed me a towel. Oh, you poor thing, she said. Go get cleaned up. Your sister made a beautiful painting today. I want to show you. There was no thank you. There was no acknowledgement of the disgusting job I had just done. My labor was as expected and as invisible as the turning of the tides. It was simply my function. Olivia's function was to be delicate and create beauty. My function was to do the dirty work that made her world possible. This dynamic was reinforced at every turn. When a storm knocked a heavy branch onto the roof, it was me, the 16-year-old, who had to climb up with a chainsaw to cut it apart because my dad didn't want to risk it. When my mom wanted to rearrange the entire living room, it was me who had to move the solid oak bookshelf that weighed a ton. Mrs. Gable, our sweet, eagle-eyed neighbor, saw it all. She'd often find an excuse to come over with a plate of cookies while I was in the middle of some backbreaking project. Your parents are so lucky to have you, Michael, she'd say, but her eyes held a look of pity that I didn't understand at the time. You work so hard for them. I thought she was complimenting me. I didn't realize she was trying to tell me something. She wasn't seeing a helpful son. She was seeing a child laborer. The ultimate proof of my role came the summer I turned 17. The entire wooden deck needed to be stripped, sanded, and restained. It was a huge job. My dad bought all the supplies, filled the garage with cans of stain and sandpaper. The very next day, he announced that a can't-miss work opportunity had come up in Seattle. He, my mom, and Olivia would be gone for the week. You've got this, champ, he said, clapping my shoulder at the door. Think of it as your project. Take ownership. For 8 days I worked. The sun beat down on my back. My hands were a raw mess of blisters and splinters. I worked until I was too exhausted to see straight. When they came back, tanned and relaxed from their work trip, they marveled at the deck. It's gorgeous, my mom said. It looks professional. My dad walked the perimeter, inspecting my work like a drill sergeant. He found a single drip of stain on one of the support posts, pointed at it and said, "Attention to detail, son." Then he winked. "But good job. You saved us at least $3,000 in labor." My reward for saving them $3,000 was my favorite takeout pizza. As I sat there, eating my pizza, too tired to even speak, Olivia was showing them the expensive art supplies she had bought in Seattle. With their money they had, in part, because they never had to pay for my labor. I was an asset, a very profitable, unpaid subsidiary of the family business. And business, as I was about to find out, was booming. The transition from physical labor to financial support was seamless. It was just another form of work, another way for me to fulfill my function. The day I got my first real job after graduating from community college, my dad sat me down for the talk. It wasn't about the birds and the bees. It was about dollars and cents. He laid out a stack of bills on the kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. "Michael," he said, his voice grave, "you're a man now, a working man, and with that comes responsibility. Your mother and we're not getting any younger. Things are tight." He pushed the electric bill towards me. "We need you to step up. We need you to contribute." It wasn't a request. It was a promotion. I had graduated from unpaid handyman to financial contributor. I was so conditioned to seek their approval that I actually felt a surge of pride. I was helping. I was important. I agreed to pay for all the utilities. What I didn't know was that this was a test, a trial run, and I passed with flying colors. A few months later, the real crisis hit. Or at least the real crisis. It was another kitchen table summit. This time, my mother was there, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My dad had a letter from the bank in his hand. It was a foreclosure warning. He said he'd gotten behind on the mortgage. His company had frozen bonuses and he'd miscalculated. They were in danger of losing everything. "I've failed you," he said, his voice cracking. He wouldn't look at me. "I've failed this family." My mom let out a small sob. "This house is our whole life," she whispered. "It's all we have." It was a masterful performance. I was 21 years old, naive, and completely terrified at the thought of my family being thrown out onto the street. The thought of Olivia, still in college, having her home taken away. "I'll help," I said, my voice coming out faster than my brain could process. "How much is it?" "I'll cover it." The relief on their faces was instantaneous. My dad finally looked at me, his eyes full of what I thought was grateful tears. "You're a good son, Michael," he said. "The best son. This is just temporary. Just until I can get us back on solid ground. A year, maybe 2 at the most." So I did it. I sat down with my dad, and we went through my salary, my expenses. We calculated how much I could afford. We set up an automatic bank transfer from my account to his. It was a massive chunk of my income, nearly 60% of it. But it was for my family. It was to save our home. That temporary arrangement lasted for 7 years. The years blurred together in a haze of work and transfers. I never moved out. How could I? I was paying the mortgage on the house I was living in. But it never felt like mine. I was a tenant whose rent was the entire financial burden of the property. Meanwhile, Olivia blossomed. The money I was pumping into the household freed up my parents' income for her. She got the new car for her high school graduation. They paid her tuition at a prestigious private arts college without her having to take out a single student loan. My own student debt from community college felt like a lead weight in my gut. The final straw, the thing that planted the first real seed of deep, corrosive resentment, was her 24th birthday. I had been working insane hours to get a small promotion, and the bonus that came with it was the first extra money I'd seen in years. I was planning to use it to finally pay off my student loan. That weekend, my family threw a big birthday party for Olivia. At the party, she made a grand announcement. She was quitting her part-time job at a coffee shop to open her own art gallery. She had found the perfect little space to rent. "And I couldn't have done it without my amazing parents," she said, raising a glass of champagne. "They're funding the whole thing for me. They believe in my dream." Everyone cheered. I felt my smile freeze on my face. I looked at my parents, who were beaming at her, soaking in the praise. They were funding her dream. With my money. With the bonus I was going to use to buy my own financial freedom. Later that night, I overheard my mom talking to my aunt. "We're so proud," she said. "We've been putting money aside for her for years. It's so important to give your children the best possible start in life." I walked away. I went up to my room, the room I was paying for, and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The person staring back looked like a fool. A tired, overworked, exploited fool. The best possible start in life was apparently only for one of their children. The other one was just the engine that powered the whole machine. The person who finally forced me to look at the machine I was powering was my best friend, Dominic. Dom wasn't just a work colleague. He was the brother I never had. We had a shorthand, an ability to be brutally honest with each other. He knew I was helping my family, but he didn't know the extent of it. I was too ashamed to tell him the full story. He finally saw it firsthand when he came over to watch a football game. We were in the living room, and during halftime my dad called me into the kitchen. "Hey, Mike," he said, pointing at the dishwasher. "Things making a weird noise again. Can you take a look? You know your way around these things." It wasn't a request. It was an order disguised as a compliment. Before I could even answer, I heard Dom from the living room. "Henry, the game's about to start back up. It'll just take him a minute," my dad called back, already walking away. He's the expert. So while the game restarted, I was on my hands and knees in the kitchen, pulling out the dishwasher. Dom came and stood in the doorway, a beer in his hand, just watching me. He didn't say a word, but his silence was heavy with judgment. After about 20 minutes of me tinkering with the motor, I finally got it to stop making the grinding noise. I came back into the living room, wiping grease from my hands, and sat down. The game was almost over. "You missed a hell of a fourth quarter," Dom said, his eyes not on the TV but on me. "Yeah, well," I mumbled. "Duty calls. Is that what you call it?" he asked, his voice quiet but sharp. After the game, he insisted we go out. "We need to talk," he said. The moment we were in the solitude of his car, he dropped the bomb. "I'm going to be blunt, because I'm your friend," he started. "What I saw in there tonight wasn't a family. It was a business, and you're the only employee who doesn't get a paycheck." I started to get defensive. "It's not like that. They needed help with the dishwasher." "The dishwasher? Michael, come on," he said, his voice rising with frustration. "It's not about the damn dishwasher. It's about the fact that your father, an able-bodied man, ordered you to fix it during the one night you have off. It's about the fact that they see you as a free utility. Handyman, mechanic, and from what you've hinted at, their personal bank." He pulled the car over to the side of the road and killed the engine. He turned to face me fully. "Let me ask you some questions. You're a data guy, so just think of it as a survey. Do you pay their mortgage?" I hesitated. "I help with it." "Answer the question. Do you make the payment every month that keeps the roof over their head?" "Yes," I admitted, the word tasting like ash. "Okay. Is your name on the deed to that house?" "No." "Do you have a formal, written loan agreement with them?" "No. It's family." "Wrong," he shot back. "It's a multi-$100,000 asset that you are paying for but have zero legal claim to. Now, next question. Your sister, Olivia, does she contribute financially?" "She's an artist," I said weakly. "She's just getting started." "That's not what I asked. Does she pay for the utilities? Does she contribute to the mortgage? Does she fix the damn dishwasher?" "No. And yet," Dom continued, leaning in, "they're funding her gallery. Where do you think that money is coming from, man? It's not growing on a tree in the backyard you probably landscaped for free. It's coming from the money they don't have to spend on the house because you are covering it. They are literally taking your future and handing it to her." Every word was a punch. He was articulating every dark, resentful thought that had been swirling in the back of my mind for years. "You need to wake up," he said, his voice softening a little. "You're a good guy, Michael. The best. And they are using your goodness against you. You need to find out what their long-term plan is. Because I promise you it doesn't involve you getting your fair share. People who value you don't treat you like a tool." We drove the rest of the way to the bar in silence. But my mind was screaming. Dom hadn't told me anything I didn't already know, deep down, but he had dared to say it out loud. He had given a name to the monster in the room. Exploitation. I walked back into that house later that night, and for the first time I didn't see my home. I saw a balance sheet, and I was on the wrong side of the ledger. Dom's words lit a fire under me. I stopped being a passive participant in my own life and started being a quiet observer. I turned my analytical brain, the one I used to find patterns in stock market data and consumer behavior, onto my own family. And a disturbing pattern quickly emerged. It was in the little things. The way my mom would casually mention a new bill, but only when my dad wasn't around. The way my dad would talk about his tight budget for the month right before asking me for an advance on my contribution. They were working as a team, a well-oiled machine designed to extract resources. For me, the hushed conversations became more frequent. I'd walk into the living room, and they'd fall silent. My mother suddenly intensely interested in a catalog. My father clearing his throat and changing the subject to sports. They were hiding something big. My gut told me it had to do with the house. The confirmation came on a cold, rainy night. I had gotten a flat tire on the way home from work, so I was much later than usual. I let myself in through the garage, and the house was quiet. I figured they were all in bed. As I walked past the kitchen on my way upstairs, I heard their voices, low and urgent. They were at the kitchen table, the three of them, Henry, Eleanor, and Olivia. They hadn't heard me come in. I flattened myself against the wall in the dark hallway and listened. "Mr. Grayson, the realtor, is very optimistic," my dad was saying. "He said the market is insane right now. With the new deck and the kitchen upgrades, he thinks we can list for $650 and maybe even get a bidding war up to $700,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. $700,000. And they were using the very upgrades I had made, the deck I had stained and the kitchen I had retiled, as selling points. "That's wonderful, Henry," my mom said, her voice giddy. "That's more than enough. We can put a nice down payment on that condo in Florida and still have plenty to set Olivia up properly. And the timing is perfect," my dad continued. "We sell in May, close in June. We're in Florida by July. Michael will be a little shocked, but he'll get over it. He's resilient." Resilient, that's what they called it. I wasn't a person with feelings. I was a thing that could bounce back. Then Olivia, my beloved sister, spoke up. Her voice was the one that truly twisted the knife. "What about Michael? I mean, isn't he going to feel, I don't know, entitled to some of that money? He's paid for so much." I held my breath, waiting for one of my parents to show a shred of decency, of conscience. I was an idiot. "Entitled to what?" my mother said with a sharp, dismissive laugh. Her laugh was the ugliest sound I had ever heard. "Sweetheart, he's been paying rent if you want to be generous. Legally, every dime he's given us is a gift. His name isn't on the deed, it isn't on the mortgage. He has no claim. We've had our lawyer, Mr. Davies, look at everything. We're completely in the clear." "She's right," my dad added, his voice dripping with condescending certainty. "It's the classic Michael move. All heart, no head for business. He never asked for anything in writing. That's on him. He's a big boy, he'll land on his feet." They were planning to sell the house out from under me, take the massive profit that I had helped build, and move to Florida, leaving me with nothing but a month's notice to find a new place to live. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a heist. A long, slow, meticulously planned heist that had been going on for years. And I was the mark. I felt a cold rage spread through my veins, pushing out the shock and the pain. They had a lawyer. They had a plan. They thought I was a fool. I backed away from the doorway, my movements slow and deliberate. I went up to my room, shut the door without making a sound, and sat in the dark. The house around me suddenly felt alien, hostile. It was no longer my home. It was evidence. And my family? They were no longer my family. They were the opposition. And if they had a lawyer, then I needed to get one too. The game was on. The next 6 months were a masterclass in deception. On the surface, I was the same dependable, oblivious Michael. I kept up my charade with an Oscar-worthy performance. I'd ask my dad about his day, listen to my mom's gossip, and even offer Olivia advice on her gallery's business plan. Each interaction was a lie, and each lie tasted like acid in my throat, but it was necessary. I needed them to believe I was still their fool. My real life began after they went to bed. My bedroom transformed from a place of rest into a forensic accounting office. My laptop was my weapon, and my analytical skills were my ammunition. I started by creating a master spreadsheet. I called it Project Reclamation. I began with my digital footprint, a decade of my life stored in bank servers and email archives. I spent hours night after night scrolling through years of bank statements. I tagged every single electronic transfer to my parents' account. I categorized them: mortgage, utilities, property tax, emergency roof, emergency plumbing. The numbers grew at an alarming rate, a monument to my own blind loyalty. Then I turned to my email. I searched for keywords: help, bill, loan. Oh, urgent. Hundreds of messages popped up. I read every single one. My mother's pleading tones, my father's man-to-man requests. I saved each one as a PDF, numbering them chronologically. Exhibit 1, email from E. Chun requesting funds for gas bill. Exhibit 2, text from H. Chun regarding urgent need for water heater repair funds. It was a sickening, undeniable paper trail of their manipulation. But the digital records weren't enough. I needed physical evidence. I started searching the house, quietly, carefully. I learned the rhythm of their movements, the creak of the floorboards. When my dad was out golfing and my mom was at her book club, I would conduct my raids. I started in the office, a room I was rarely allowed into. I photographed every bill I could find, every tax statement, every insurance document. The most stressful part was keeping my composure. One afternoon, my mom came home early and found me in the office. My heart leaped into my throat. I had a folder of property tax receipts open on the desk. "Michael, what are you doing in here?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. I thought fast. "Just looking for a pen," I said, holding one up with a shaky hand. "All the ones in the kitchen are dead." She narrowed her eyes for a second, then her face softened. "Oh, okay, honey. Well, come on out of there. Your father doesn't like people messing with his desk." It was a close call. Too close. I moved my search to the garage and the basement, places they rarely went. I found old receipts from Home Depot and Lowe's, purchases made with my credit card for thousands of dollars in lumber, tile, and plumbing supplies. I found the instruction manual for the water heater I installed, with my greasy fingerprints still on it. Each item went into a file box I kept hidden in the trunk of my car. I contacted my friend Cooper, the contractor. I sent him a list of all the major projects I'd completed on the house over the years: the deck, the kitchen remodel, the bathroom retiling, the landscaping, the new fence. "Hey man, weird request," I wrote. "Can you give me a rough, professional estimate of what a client would pay for this list of work?" His reply came back a day later. The subject line was just, "Dude." The attached invoice was for over $45,000 in labor alone. "And that's a friends and family discount," he wrote. "You basically rebuilt half that house for them." After months of this painstaking work, my project reclamation spreadsheet was a thing of beauty. The grand total of my direct financial contributions was $85,721.48. When I added Cooper's labor estimate, the number soared past $130,000. It was more than just money. It was my youth. It was my 20s. It was the life I could have been building for myself. And I had the proof. Every last damning cent of it. It was time to find out what it was worth in a court of law. I had a mountain of evidence, but it was all predicated on one thing: my word against theirs. They would claim poverty. They would weep and wail about their financial struggles, painting me as a cruel son kicking them when they were down. I knew I needed something more. I needed to prove not just that I had given them money, but that they hadn't actually needed it. I needed to find their lie. The opportunity presented itself in the most mundane way imaginable. My mother, in a fit of spring-cleaning energy, declared the attic a disaster zone. "Michael, honey, I need your help," she said one Saturday morning. "You're the only one strong enough to move those heavy old trunks. We need to clear it out." My role: the workhorse. For once, I was thrilled to play the part. The attic was a dusty, forgotten landscape of family history, and a perfect place to hide things. I spent the morning hauling boxes of old clothes and holiday decorations. I sweated, I coughed on dust, and I played the part of the dutiful son. As I moved an old steamer trunk filled with my grandfather's army uniforms, I saw it. Tucked behind a stack of water-stained encyclopedias, almost completely hidden in the shadows of the eaves, was a small, gray metal file box. It was sleek and modern, completely out of place among the decades-old clutter. It had a keyhole on the front. It was locked. My pulse quickened. People don't lock away sentimental junk. They lock away secrets. I waited for my chance. Later that afternoon, my parents went out to run errands. The house was empty. I flew up the attic stairs, my heart pounding. I retrieved the box and took it to my room, locking my own door behind me. I didn't have the key, but years of being a handyman had taught me a few things. A sturdy paperclip and a small screwdriver were all I needed. I felt like a spy in a cheap movie, my hands fumbling with the lock. After a few tense moments, I heard a satisfying click. The box popped open. The contents weren't sensational at first glance. Just files, neatly organized. But the labels on the tabs made my breath catch in my throat. Bank of America Savings, Fidelity Investment Account, E-Trade Stock Portfolio. This wasn't an old, forgotten account. These were active. I pulled out the top file. It was a Bank of America Savings account statement for Henry and Eleanor Chun. It was dated just 2 months prior. I looked at the summary at the top of the page. My eyes scanned past the account number, looking for the balance. And then I saw it. Ending balance, $82,451.37. The number didn't seem real. It swam before my eyes. $82,000. While they were crying poverty to me, while they were telling me they couldn't make the mortgage, they had more money sitting in a single savings account than I had made in the last year and a half. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to sit down on my bed. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a case of financial mismanagement. This was a cold, calculated, long-term fraud. I frantically dug through the other files. It got worse. The Fidelity account held a portfolio of mutual funds worth over $30,000. The E-Trade account was smaller, mostly blue-chip stocks, but it was still another 15 grand. All told, they had nearly $130,000 in liquid assets, completely hidden from me. I started looking at the transaction histories, and that's when I felt the final piece of my heart turn to stone. I saw monthly deposits into the savings account. $1,000 here, $1,500 there. The dates were chilling. They often corresponded to the first week of the month, right after I made my mortgage payment to them. The picture was now brutally, sickeningly clear. They were taking my money to pay for the house, and then taking the money they should have been using for the house and funneling it directly into their secret savings. I wasn't just keeping them afloat. I was their primary source of investment capital. I didn't hesitate. I laid each document out on my bed and, with a steady hand I didn't know I possessed, I photographed every single page with my phone. The summaries, the transaction histories, everything. I created a new subfolder in my evidence cloud drive. I named it the smoking gun. I carefully put every paper back in its file, placed the files back in the box, snapped it shut, and carried it back to the attic. I tucked it back into its dark corner behind the encyclopedias, a hidden serpent waiting to strike. When I came back down to my room, the rage was gone. It had been replaced by something much colder, much more dangerous. A feeling of absolute, unbreakable resolve. The son they knew was gone forever, and in his place was a creditor. And I was coming to collect. The weeks after finding the file box were the most difficult. I was living with a time bomb, and the waiting was excruciating. I had everything I needed. My lawyer, Jonathan, a sharp, no-nonsense guy I'd found after 3 consultations, had reviewed my evidence. His reaction when I showed him the photos from the file box was a slow, impressed whistle. "Well, Michael," he had said, leaning back in his chair, "this just went from a strong case to an absolute slam dunk. The financial hardship argument is dead on arrival. Now we just need them to make one final, irrefutable mistake. We need them to act on their plan to cut you out. When they do, we strike. So I waited. I went to work. I smiled at the dinner table. I listened to my father's pontifications about the importance of hard work and my mother's complaints about the rising cost of groceries. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe, but I held my tongue. I was a coiled snake waiting. The strike came, as you know, at 11:27 p.m. on a Tuesday. The text message from my father was the mistake Jonathan had been waiting for. It was arrogant. It was cruel. And it was the most beautiful gift my father had ever given me. It was concrete proof of his intent to oust me from the property, a key legal term. I forwarded the screenshot to Jonathan. My email contained only 3 words. This is it. His reply was almost instantaneous. Got it. I'll file the petition for partition and the unjust enrichment claim first thing in the morning. A process server will be at their door by the afternoon. My advice to you now is critical. Go completely dark. Do not answer their calls. Do not reply to their texts. Do not engage in any way. Let all communication go through me. Let them panic. And panic they did. The next afternoon, my phone began to explode. First, a call from my mother. Her name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, my heart pounding a little, and pressed the ignore button. Felt incredible. She immediately called back. I ignored it again. The voicemail she left was pure, hysterical fury. Michael Chun, what is the meaning of this? A man came to our door. He served us with papers. You're suing us. Your own family? After everything, this is how you repay me? You call me back this instant. Then came the barrage from my father. Call after call after call. He didn't bother leaving a voicemail. It was just a relentless, angry assault on my phone. I silenced it and put it in my desk drawer. The climax came the following morning. The call from the unknown number. The panicked, stammering voicemail from their lawyer, Mr. Davies. A man who had clearly just had the worst conversation of his life with his clients. Mr. Chun, we have a serious problem. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. That was the sound of the power dynamic shifting. The sound of their carefully constructed world beginning to shatter. The sound of their arrogance crashing headfirst into the wall of my meticulously documented reality. They thought they were kicking me out. They had no idea they had just opened the door for me to walk in and take half of everything they owned. The war had begun, not with a bang, but with the quiet filing of a legal document. And I was going to win. The week that followed was a strategic game of chess. My family's opening move was a relentless emotional blitzkrieg. My phone was a war zone of escalating tactics. The angry texts gave way to pleading ones. From my mom, Michael, we can talk about this. There's no need for lawyers. This is a family matter. You're breaking my heart. Then came the guilt trips from my sister, Olivia. Mike, I don't know what they told you, but you've got it all wrong. You're tearing this family apart over some money. Please just call Dad. I followed Jonathan's advice like a religion. I didn't just ignore them. I blocked them. Every number. I created an email filter that automatically archived their messages into a folder I shared with Jonathan. Their desperate pleas and angry accusations became nothing more than additional exhibits for our case. My silence was my shield and my sword. It protected me from their manipulation, and I knew it was driving them absolutely crazy. While they were flailing, I spent that week solidifying my position. I met with Cooper for coffee. I laid out the whole story. He wasn't surprised. I knew it, man, he said, shaking his head in disgust. The way your dad used to talk to you on those projects. Like you were his employee, not his son. That invoice I sent you? Let me make it official. I'll get it notarized. You deserve every penny you get from them. My next visit was harder. I went to see Mrs. Gable. I found her tending to her roses. I felt a knot of guilt in my stomach for dragging this sweet, elderly woman into my family's toxic mess. I sat with her on her porch swing, and I told her everything. I didn't spare the ugly details. She listened without interruption, her gentle eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she reached out and took my hand. Her skin was soft and papery. "Michael," she said, her voice filled with a strength that surprised me. "For 20 years, I've watched you. I saw you shoveling their driveway after a snowstorm when you were just a boy, while your father watched from the window. I heard your mother bragging to me once about how she never had to hire a painter because she had you. She said it like she was proud of how clever she was." She squeezed my hand. "Don't you feel an ounce of guilt? Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stand up to the people who are supposed to protect them. Your lawyer can call me. I will be happy to sign an affidavit. I will tell them what I saw." Leaving her house, I felt a profound sense of validation. It wasn't just my spreadsheets and my receipts anymore. It was the truth witnessed and confirmed by others. My case wasn't just a collection of data. It was a story, and it was a story that was undeniably true. The day before the scheduled mediation, Jonathan and I had our final strategy session. He had the 2 massive binders of evidence on his conference table. They looked like weapons. "Okay," he said. "Here's the plan. They're going to try to make this emotional. They will cry. They will yell. They will talk about your childhood, about a mother's love, about a father's sacrifice. It's all theater. You are not to engage. You are a silent observer. You will look them in the eye, and you will say nothing. Let me be the bad guy. Let me be the one to present the cold, hard facts. Our goal is not to reconcile. Our goal is to make them understand the catastrophic mistake they've made, and to make them surrender." He patted the top binder. "And with this," he said with a thin, confident smile, "surrender is their only option." The conference room at their lawyer's office felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The mahogany table was so polished I could see my own nervous reflection in it. The air was thick and smelled of old leather and fear. My fear, and soon theirs. Jonathan and I sat on one side, our 2 thick binders placed squarely in the center of the table like a declaration of war. The door opened and they entered. It was the first time I had seen them in over a week. My father, Henry, strode in first, his face a thundercloud of self-righteous anger. He was trying to project power, but I could see the tremor in his hand. My mother, Eleanor, followed, already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her face a carefully constructed mask of a wounded matriarch. And behind them, my sister, Olivia, looking pale and uncertain, unable to meet my eyes. Their lawyer, the flustered Mr. Davies, scurried in behind them like a man being led to his own execution. They took their seats. The silence stretched for a full minute, a tense, humming void. My father locked his eyes on me, a look of pure hatred and betrayal. I held his gaze, my face a blank slate, just as Jonathan had coached me. My emotional detachment seemed to unnerve him more than any outburst could have. Mr. Davies, sweating slightly under the fluorescent lights, cleared his throat and began. "Thank you all for coming. The goal here is to find an amicable resolution to what is clearly a painful family misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" My father's voice boomed, slamming his fist on the table. The sound cracked through the room. "There's no misunderstanding. This is a betrayal, an act of profound disrespect from a son we gave everything to. We put a roof over your head, food in your mouth, and this is how you thank us? By trying to steal our retirement with some slick, overpriced lawyer." I didn't flinch. I let his words wash over me. They were just noise, the last roars of a dying king. My mother began to cry on cue. "We love you, Michael," she sobbed, her voice catching. "How can you think we would ever intentionally hurt you? All the help you gave, it was from your heart. It was a son taking care of his parents. That's what a family does." Jonathan let her finish. He gave her a moment of silence, allowing her performance to hang in the air. Then he spoke, his voice calm, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Mrs. Chun, Mr. Chun," he began, "let's dispense with the theater. We are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss facts and figures. And the facts, I'm afraid, tell a very different story." He reached forward and opened the first binder with a crisp snap. You claim Michael was simply a tenant paying his fair share. Yet, we have 7 years of bank records showing payments that far exceed any reasonable market rent for a room in your home. Furthermore, we have dozens of emails and texts from you soliciting these funds, never once using the word rent, but frequently using words like emergency, shortfall, and loan. He turned the binder to face them. On the first page was a blown-up copy of an email from my dad. Michael, need to talk. Bank called again about the mortgage. We're in real trouble. Below it was the record of my $1,850 transfer the next day. This is not a rental agreement, Jonathan said coldly. This is a documented pattern of financial solicitation under false pretenses. He began turning the pages. Each page was a new blow. The receipt for the new roof, the invoice from the plumber, the credit card statement showing the new appliances. My father's face got darker and darker. My mother's sobs became quieter, more genuine. Mr. Davies was frantically shuffling through his own meager file, looking utterly blindsided. He had clearly only been told his client's side of the story. Then came the moment that shattered any remaining shred of affection I had for my sister. Olivia, who had been silent until now, spoke up. But he was always happy to help, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He liked fixing things. He offered to do the deck. He said it was good exercise. The betrayal was so sharp, so absolute, it stole my breath. She wasn't just defending them. She was actively participating in the lie. She was trying to erase my experience, to paint my years of coerced labor as a hobby. She was making me the villain of my own story. In that moment, I saw her for what she was. Not an innocent bystander, but a willing accomplice. Olivia's comment was the lifeline my father was desperate for. He pounced on it. Exactly, he boomed, pointing a finger at Olivia. His sister knows. He enjoyed it. He took pride in it. This entire lawsuit is a fabrication. A twisted fantasy created by a greedy, ungrateful boy who has forgotten the meaning of family. Mr. Davies, their lawyer, tried to build on this momentum, though he looked increasingly uncomfortable. My client's position is that Michael's contributions, both financial and physical, were made voluntarily and with love. There was never any expectation of repayment or ownership. This is a classic case of a gift giver having regrets later on. Jonathan listened to the whole speech with an unnerving patience. He let the words ungrateful and gift giver hang in the air. He then slowly, deliberately closed the first binder. The sound of the rings snapping shut was like a judge's gavel. He then reached for the second binder, placing his hand on it as if it were a holy book. Let's talk about gifts, Jonathan said, his voice now taking on a new, dangerous edge. Let's talk about the narrative you've constructed. The narrative of a poor, struggling family, barely keeping their heads above water, being saved by their loving, generous son. It's the truth, my mother insisted, her voice thin. Is it? Jonathan asked. He opened the second binder. Unlike the first one, which was filled with black and white documents, this one contained glossy, color printouts. He slid the first one across the mahogany table. It stopped directly in front of my father. It was the statement for the secret Bank of America savings account. The one with the $82,000 balance. Can you identify this account, Mr. Chun? Jonathan asked politely. My father stared at the paper. All the blood drained from his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Mr. Davies leaned over to look, and his jaw literally dropped. He looked at my parents with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. What is this? He mouthed at them. Before they could even formulate a lie, Jonathan slid another paper across the table. It was the Fidelity Investment Portfolio Summary. And this one? He pressed. An account containing a healthy mix of stocks and mutual funds, currently valued at over $30,000. My mother made a small, strangled sound in the back of her throat. Olivia's eyes darted between her parents and the papers, her face a mask of confusion. But the gift I'm most interested in, Jonathan continued, his voice dripping with ice, is this one. He slid the final, damning document over. The The summary for the Olivia Chun College and Future Fund. The one with the balance of over $114,000. This account, Jonathan explained to the stunned room, was opened 7 years ago, the same month you first claimed you were about to be foreclosed on and asked Michael to start paying the mortgage. We had a forensic accountant analyze the deposits. And what a fascinating pattern he found. The largest deposits into this future fund were made in the very same months that Michael paid for your emergencies. $4,200 for the new roof for Michael, followed by a $4,000 deposit into Olivia's fund a week later. $2,500 for the new water heater from Michael, followed by a $2,500 deposit 2 days later. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It seems you weren't using Michael's money to survive. You were using him as your personal investment banker to fund a secret nest egg for your daughter. You weren't just staying afloat, you were getting rich off his labor. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Olivia was staring at her parents, her mouth hanging open in what looked like genuine shock. It seemed this was one secret they hadn't shared with their golden child. She was the beneficiary of a crime she didn't even know was being committed. My father was breathing heavily, his face a mottled shade of red and white. My mother was openly weeping now, but these were not the crocodile tears from before. These were the tears of a con artist who had just been exposed. Jonathan let the weight of the moment settle. Then he delivered the final, fatal blow. He took out one last piece of paper, a printout of my father's text message. He placed it gently on top of the financial statements. And when you thought you had squeezed him dry, Jonathan said, his voice ringing with contempt, when you were ready to cash in on the house he had maintained and paid for, this is the thank you he received. We've changed all the locks. You're not welcome anymore. He looked directly at Mr. Davies. This is not a family misunderstanding. This is a calculated, long-term case of financial fraud, capped off with an act of indisputable malicious intent. Now, shall we discuss what a fair settlement looks like? Or would you prefer to explain these documents to a judge? It was a checkmate, a flawless victory. I looked at the faces of the people who had raised me, and I saw nothing I recognized. Just the empty, defeated faces of strangers who had been caught. This was the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for staying with me to this point. You're awesome. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've journeyed with me this far. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The rest of the mediation was a formality. It was no longer a negotiation. It was a surrender. Mr. Davies, looking thoroughly disgusted with his own clients, quickly advised them to accept our initial demand. A 50% equity stake in the house, to be realized through an immediate court-ordered partition sale. There was some weak sputtering from my father about payment plans and keeping the house in the family. But Jonathan shut it down with a single cold stare. The papers were signed before we left the room. The weeks that followed were a strange, hollow purgatory. The legal system moved slowly, but the outcome was now inevitable. The court simply had to rubber stamp the agreement we had already reached. I spent that time on Dominic's couch, living out of a suitcase, feeling like a refugee from a war I had just won. The final court order arrived in an email. It was a dry, legalistic document, but to me it was the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared me a legal co-owner of the property and ordered its immediate sale and the equal division of the proceeds. I stared at the PDF on my laptop screen. I had done it. I had fought the system that had been designed to keep me down, and I had won. But the feeling wasn't elation. It was a quiet, profound, and soul-deep exhaustion. The adrenaline that had fueled me for months drained away, leaving a vast emptiness behind. My first call as a property owner was to instruct Jonathan to get the ball rolling on the sale. I wanted it done. I wanted the house, that monument to my own exploitation, turned into liquid cash and scrubbed from my life. The for sale sign was hammered into the front lawn a week later. I drove by that evening, parking across the street just to look at it. It was a strange sight. My entire childhood, my entire identity as the good son, was now on the market, reduced to a listing price and a set of open house dates. It was a painful sight, but it was also a hopeful one. It wasn't just a house for sale. It was my past for sale, and I couldn't wait to be rid of it. With the sale of the house imminent, my family's desperation reached a fever pitch. Their legal options were gone, so they reverted to their oldest and most reliable weapon: emotional manipulation. The voicemails were a daily occurrence. My mother would cry, talking about memories, about my first steps in the living room, about how I was destroying their legacy. My father would leave angry, rambling messages, calling me a traitor and accusing me of being brainwashed by my shyster lawyer. I knew I couldn't just disappear. For my own peace of mind, I needed a final, definitive closure. I needed to say my piece, not in a lawyer's office but face to face. I agreed to meet them for coffee. My one condition was that Olivia not be there. This was between the three of us. We met at a sterile, impersonal Starbucks, a neutral territory that held no memories. They looked terrible. They seemed to have aged 10 years in a few short weeks. The stress and shame had taken their toll. My mother spoke first, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup as if for warmth. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling, "we know we made mistakes. We lost our way. But you can't do this. You can't just erase your family." "I'm not the one who erased it," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I had rehearsed this. I would not let them provoke me." "You did. You erased it with every bill you handed me, with every lie you told, with every dollar you funneled into a secret account while telling me you were broke." "It was for Olivia," my father interjected, his voice rising. "We just wanted her to have a good start. You were doing so well, you were strong. We thought you could handle it." "Strong?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "That's your word for it. I call it being used. Did you ever once stop to think what my dreams were? Did you ever ask me what I wanted for my future? Or was I just the engine, the workhorse that was supposed to pull the family cart while Olivia got to ride inside?" They had no answer. "I didn't come here to fight," I continued, leaning forward. "I didn't come here for an apology because, frankly, I don't think you're capable of a real one. I came here to say goodbye. The court will divide the money. After that, we are done. You will lose my phone number. You will lose my address. You will refer to me as a memory, because that's all I will be to you." My mother started to cry again. "You can't mean that. I'm your mother. A mother wouldn't have done this," I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. "A father wouldn't have sent that text message. You stopped being my parents a long time ago. You became my employers, and I've just been audited. And now I quit." I stood up, leaving my own full cup of coffee on the table. I looked at their stunned, broken faces one last time. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of their betrayal. "Have a good life in Florida," I said. Then I turned and walked out the door, and I did not look back. The sale of the house closed in record time. A young family, eager to get into the neighborhood, paid over the asking price. When all the dust settled, when the lawyers and the agents and the government had all taken their cut, a wire transfer appeared in my newly opened bank account. The number was surreal: $319,742.18. Staring at that balance on my banking app felt like looking at a typo. For my entire adult life, my account had been a place of scarcity, a constant battle to stay above zero. Now it was a place of possibility. It was a number that represented freedom. It was my back pay. It was the price of my pain, and it was the key to my future. My first move wasn't glamorous. I didn't buy a sports car. I hired a highly recommended financial advisor named Sebastian. We sat in his office, and for the first time I felt like a real adult. He listened to my story with a calm, professional empathy. "This isn't just a windfall, Michael," he told me. "This is restitution. Our job is to make this money work for you, to build the future that was put on hold." We spent hours creating a plan. We maxed out my retirement accounts. We built a diversified investment portfolio. We set aside a healthy emergency fund. And most importantly, we calculated a safe and reasonable budget for a down payment on a home. A home that would be mine and mine alone. The house hunt was a joyful experience. Every open house I walked into, I wasn't looking at leaky faucets and cracked drywall as a chore list. I was looking at potential, at a place where I could be at peace. I found it in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood I never could have afforded before. It was a small but perfect townhouse, with a little patch of grass out back for a garden, and a large window in the living room that flooded the space with morning light. The day of the closing, when the lawyer slid the keys across the table to me, I almost cried. I drove straight to the townhouse and let myself in. The echo of my footsteps in the empty rooms was the most beautiful sound in the world. It was the sound of a new beginning. My friends Dominic and Cooper were my heroes during that time. They helped me paint. They helped me move my meager belongings from Dominic's apartment. We celebrated that first night with pizza and cheap beer, sitting on the floor of my empty living room, and I felt richer than I ever had in my life. Over the following months, I slowly, lovingly, turned that empty house into a home. I bought a comfortable couch. I hung art on the walls, art that I liked. I planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard, and I discovered a simple joy in watching something grow for its own sake, not because it served some purpose for someone else. One evening, I was sitting on my back patio, watching the sunset, a cold beer in my hand. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a real estate app. The condo my parents had bought in Florida had just had a price drop. They were already trying to sell it. I felt a brief, detached sadness for them. Their grand plan, built on a foundation of lies, had crumbled into dust. They had traded their son for a dream that didn't even last a year. I deleted the app. Their life was not my concern anymore. I had my own garden to tend to. In the process of unpacking the last of my boxes, I came across a small, forgotten container labeled Mom's Keepsakes. It was filled with mementos from my grandmother, Rose, who had passed away years ago. I had been storing it for my mother and had forgotten all about it. My first instinct was to throw the entire box in the trash, to purge the last remnant of her from my new life. But something stopped me. My grandmother had always been a source of quiet, unconditional love in my chaotic childhood. I owed it to her memory to at least see what was inside. The box was filled with the typical things. Old sepia-toned photographs, a pair of her reading glasses, a dried corsage. But at the bottom was a thick bundle of letters, tied with a brittle, faded blue ribbon. The letters were addressed to her sister, my great-aunt Margaret. The postmarks were from the 1980s, when my own mother was a young woman, just starting her life with my father. I sat on the floor of my new home office, the afternoon sun streaming in, and I began to read. My grandmother's cursive was elegant and flowing, a stark contrast to the ugly story the words told. The first few letters were full of pride about her daughter, Eleanor. But then, the tone began to change. An excerpt from 1985. Eleanor called again. She and Henry are having trouble making the car payment. She was crying so hard on the phone, saying they would be ruined. Of course, your father and I sent them the money. What else could we do? She's our daughter. A letter from 1987. I'm afraid we've made a mistake with Eleanor. It seems every time she and Henry want something, a new piece of furniture, a vacation, a new crisis pops up that only we can solve. Frank is starting to call it the Eleanor Emergency Fund. I laughed, but it hurts me to think she might be taking advantage of our love. Then came the letter that made me feel like I had been punched in the gut. It was from 1988, right after my parents had bought the house I just sold. Dearest Margaret, my grandmother wrote, the house is lovely, but I have a terrible feeling about it. We had to give them almost all of our savings for the down payment. Eleanor swore up and down it was a loan, that they would pay us back as soon as Henry's big promotion came through. But now, when I bring it up, she gets so angry. She accuses me of not trusting her, of loving money more than my own child. She has a way of twisting things that makes me feel like I'm the one who is being unreasonable. I look at my daughter, And sometimes, I feel like I'm looking at a stranger. A very clever, very demanding stranger. I worry, Margie. Who will she turn to when we are gone? I put the letter down, my hands trembling. It wasn't me. It had never been just me. I wasn't the first victim. I was just the sequel. My mother was not the architect of this scheme. She was its inheritor. She had learned, at a young age, how to weaponize love, how to monetize guilt, how to treat her own parents as a resource to be drained. And when that resource ran dry, she and my father simply passed the pattern on to the next generation. They cast Olivia in the role of the entitled beneficiary, and they cast me in the role my grandmother had played, the endlessly loving, endlessly exploitable bank. It didn't forgive their actions. It didn't erase the pain, but it explained the pathology. This was a sickness, a generational curse passed down like a dark, twisted heirloom. Sitting there, in my own quiet house, a house built on my own terms, I felt a strange sense of peace. My fight had been about more than just money or a house. It had been about breaking a cycle. My grandmother had been trapped by her love for her daughter, but I had been given the gift of their ultimate betrayal, the text message that finally set me free. They had pushed me so far that I had no choice but to break the chain. And in doing so, I had not only saved myself, but I had honored the pain of the woman who had come before me. The cycle stopped with me. It's been over a year since I walked out of that coffee shop. Life is quiet now in the best possible way. My job is still demanding, but I leave it at the office. My evenings and weekends are mine. I've taken up hiking. I've reconnected with old friends. I'm building a life that is rich in experiences, not just obligations. I never hear from them directly, but sometimes small pieces of news filter through the family grapevine. They sold the condo in Florida at a loss. They're renting somewhere in the Midwest, closer to some of my father's distant relatives. Olivia's art gallery closed after 6 months. I feel no joy in their failures, but I also feel no responsibility. They are the architects of their own misfortune. Every now and then, I think about that text message. The 6 sentences that were intended to be my undoing. We've changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. They thought they were delivering a final, crushing blow. They thought they were demonstrating their ultimate power over me. But they misunderstood the nature of prisons. Prison isn't always a place with bars. Sometimes it's a house where your value is measured by your utility. Sometimes it's a family where love is conditional upon your compliance. They didn't lock me out. They set me free. That text message wasn't the end of my story. It was the key. It was the one act of cruelty so blatant, so undeniable, that it gave me permission to finally save myself. It shattered the illusion of family and revealed the stark reality of the transaction it had become. The greatest lesson they ever taught me is that a home is not 4 walls and a roof. A home is a place where you are safe. A home is a place where you are seen. A home is a place where you are loved for who you are, not for what you can provide. I have that now. I built it for myself. I walk through my front door every evening, and the only person I have to answer to is me. I am no longer the handyman, the ATM, the good son. I am just Michael, and that is more than enough. They changed the locks on their house, but in doing so, they forced me to find the keys to my own life. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I will be forever grateful. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a strange and difficult thing when the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who cause the most harm. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your own well-being and a family relationship? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if you found any value in my experience, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Truly helps. Thank you again.